there everybody and welcome to the Talking City podcast brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. My name is Dan Murphy and joining me today as ever, and isn't it good to say that again, is Mr. Simon Bukowski. Si, how's it going?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. Me, Rita's rain as ever, and it's been an incredible week for Manchester City as well, not least because they have twice vanquished Chelsea in a matter of days. The latest one, of course, coming in the FA Cup this weekend on Sunday. A 4-0 victory, an emphatic victory at that. 2 goals from Mahrez, 1 from Phil Foden, and another from Julian Alvarez. It's been quite a successful few days for City, playing Chelsea twice and winning twice. But was this game more a case of City being really good or a case of Chelsea being really, really bad?
I don't think Chelsea were really, really bad. I was kind of discussing it with someone at the game, and they weren't like, wasn't like anyone was like 3 out of 10. They were just kind of like all 5.5. It was just like not quite there. Obviously they've got loads of injuries, but the fans obviously weren't very happy either. Chanting for Roman Abramovich and Thomas Tuchel. So clearly there's a big upset with fans not having either Graham Potter or Todd Bowley to sort of support, really. So City took advantage of that in a way that they didn't on Thursday night, I'd say. It was pretty clear from the outset that City were the better team, and 3 quick goals. I mean, the first one is brilliant from Mahrez, the second one is awful from Kai Havertz, and the third one is a brilliant City goal. And once that happened, the second half was a non-event. City knew they were in the next round, and Chelsea knew they were in the next round. Really, they had a bit of more of a go, but it never looked like City were in trouble. So you can only beat what's in front of you. But I think they've still beaten Chelsea twice in 4 days, like you say, which should be kind of noticed by everyone else.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned on last week's pod, it's kind of a blow to Chelsea as well. To lose twice to City in such quick succession, further down that Premier League, they don't look like they'll be staking any sort of challenge, maybe even for the top 4, let alone the title if things don't turn around quickly. With the way they may well be spending in January, that could change, but it doesn't look like that in the minute. And then obviously being knocked out of the FA Cup, they got to the final last year, losing. Was it actually City they knocked out on the way to that final as well, or at least one of them? There was the cup competitions were basically simultaneous last year, weren't they? With Chelsea and Liverpool both getting to the finals. But I say it deals a significant blow to Chelsea's kind of season, going out of pretty much 2 competitions. And well, as you mentioned, I think Chelsea, I know I said they were bad there, it's just like they were uninspiring. They were kind of like competent for a bit of it, and I think some of the young players they've got look really good. I think Lewis Hall actually looks like a real player. I think it was against City in the Carabao Cup, wasn't it, earlier this season when he played and should have scored at least once when he went through on Edison. He looks like a really good player, but they just, as you say, it doesn't look like they're buying into Potter at the minute, which is a shame because he's clearly a talented coach, but he's been left with quite an imbalanced squad. And it's just that Mahrez now, who we'll kind of move on to, he's kind of found his form again. But before last few weeks, he was probably City's the bottom of City's attacking pecking order, you'd say, and he's better than any forward Chelsea have got by some distance.
Yeah, definitely. I liked Lewis Hall's performance. I thought, Mahrez skinned him in the first 5 minutes, and you thought, we could be on for a sort of classic experienced pro takes apart young defender, and that really didn't happen, which is credit to him. But when you've got players like Riyad Mahrez who can just pop in free kicks like it's nobody's business, then that is one of City's strengths, that they've got players who can score from anything, really. And there's nothing more disheartening, I think, as a team who's struggling and going up against it than you don't want to give away the free kick, but you give away a free kick kind of 30 yards out, and then someone just pops it in the top corner, and you're like, all the work that you've done to keep the scores level and stay in the game, and then that happens. But yeah, it was just kind of like a bland performance from Chelsea. I think they've not got a great striker, and they really didn't look like they had any threat. I don't think Ortega had one save to make or very, very little to do. So it was a comprehensive win for City, and I think Chelsea's expected goals was like 0.09, which is just ludicrous, and especially ludicrously low for a top six game. So City absolutely controlled the game and dominated in a way that they really didn't in the first half at Stamford Bridge.
Absolutely, and it's kind of the first really strong results that you've had for quite a while now. They beat Leeds quite well 3-1, but Leeds are Leeds have defensively open they always be. But every game since the kind of restart has been quite close. They obviously drew with Everton. The Premier League game with Chelsea was only a 1-0 win. And we've talked at length about how City are a bit out of sorts, and coming back from the World Cup, it has been a bit up in the air. We've heaped praise on Rico Lewis, and we probably will again. But it's been kind of strange how Walker and Cancelo have been slow getting back in. Obviously, there's been Foden on the bench, but he started here. Walker started. Cancelo came on. Is there a bit of sense now that maybe a bit of normality is resuming with this? I know it was a kind of a changed Chelsea team with a few youngsters in, but it was a really emphatic, controlled display, one that we probably haven't seen to quite an extent for quite a while. Is this a case of City kind of getting back to the grindstone now, everything kind of equaling out after the turbulent couple of weeks?
I think so, yeah. Crises at City are always a bit overblown because they win so often that when they don't, it's like, oh, right, what's going on? And it kind of felt like Guardiola was a bit annoyed and irked by people criticising the draw with Everton because he, genuinely felt they played well and they were the better team. So it kind of like he made his bonkers formation at Chelsea and it all kind of backfired, and it was the worst half City have put in a good while, even though the second half at Everton wasn't great. And then he made those half-time changes, he made the changes on the hour mark, and everything clicks back in. And it was kind of like on Sunday in the FA Cup game, everything worked. Foden came back in and was very good. Kyle Walker came back in and was very good. They didn't let Chelsea get anywhere near their goal. Sergio Gomez, who hadn't played since the League Cup win over Chelsea, and that was a bit of a question mark because he'd kind of he hadn't gone to the World Cup and was one of the few that hadn't gone but hadn't played in any games since, and it sort of, you think, well, that doesn't look good for him if he's not starting, say, the League Cup game with Liverpool. But he, looked positive again going forwards, even if he was a bit reckless at the back. And yeah, you get 3-0 up at half time, and you can take Rodri off, who needs rest, and give Calvin Phillips time to get in. Cancelo comes on, so it was kind of like the perfect afternoon for City, and Guardiola could just sit back and enjoy it.
And it was certainly a perfect evening for Riyad Mahrez. He's been in quite a run of form since club football resumed following the World Cup. An assist at Everton, goal against Liverpool, goal against Chelsea, the winner last week, and now two here with his penalty and brilliant free kick. We've talked a lot about how comparing kind of Phillips' situation to Mahrez, and how back in October Guardiola said he isn't in the best physical condition, needs to work on it. And again, he was quite interested on Mahrez after this game here, saying that his attitude has improved a lot, and it's really reflecting his performances because he earned a new contract, and deservedly so, in the summer after being the club's top goal scorer last year, and was really good, really crucial, scoring some. I know he missed the Dortmund and another penalty, wasn't it? Before he finally dispatched his one quite emphatically against Chelsea. But he's scored important, crucial goals in the past, and he's doing it again now, and it really looks like he's gone back to that top form that he was in last season, which is obviously great for City given all the attacking options they have now.
Yeah, he's playing really well, and I think the criticism that some have had of Mahrez, and I've probably had it as well in the past, is that too many of his kind of goals and assists that you would use to say he deserves to be in the team haven't been decisive as such. They've been the third in a 4-0 win or something like that. And Guardiola does absolutely love his mentality and loves him for the big games, but when you sort of in such a competitive field, you're not scoring 3 goals in the derby, are you? And things like that. And he is the least flexible City forward in the sense that he can only play on the right wing, and that's that. That is a problem for City bringing through Cole Palmer, because Cole Palmer's best position and the position he enjoys most is the right wing. So, if you having it, you can give Palmer a chance in the FA Cup or the League Cup, but if you're not playing him on the right wing, you've got to accept that you're not going to get the best out of him. He was on the left for the Chelsea game. He did all right, but like I say, you're never going to get the best out of him, because if you play Mahrez has to play on the right wing. But when he's doing things like that, you don't mind, because he's winning your games. And I think there have been times in his City career where he has been absolutely crucial. I think the 2020-21 season was probably his best in a City shirt, especially that run through to the Champions League final. He was outstanding. Last year, he got more goals and assists, but like I was saying, it didn't feel like he had a better season, and Guardiola certainly didn't think so. And then, this season he's been called out for being not fit, basically, by the manager, just like he did with Calvin Phillips. But it felt like, it was a long way back for him to get into the team, but he's done it, and he showed everyone else this is how you do it. And the derby's in a week, and you certainly won't bet against Mahrez being in the 11 for that, because Guardiola loves his attitude and, also sees that he's very much in form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. A player who might be struggling a little bit more to get into the starting 11, but was back in it for the first time since winning the World Cup on Sunday, was Julian Alvarez. He marks his return to the starting lineup with a goal from the penalty spot, just about sneaking it in past Kepa Arrizabalaga. How did Alvarez do? Starting? Haaland wasn't involved, as we'll touch on. He led the line. Has Haaland got some serious competition for a starting berth, or will it still be the case of Alvarez comes in just to rest the Norwegian?
I think Alvarez would have to score 30 goals in 20 games to give Haaland any kind of competition for a starting place, because that's just how good Haaland is. I was really impressed with the penalty, and especially Kepa trying to put him off, and Alvarez just laughing it off basically and then sticking it past him. Kepa nearly got there, but he didn't, because the penalty was too well taken, and City have had plenty of issues with penalties, and it looks like they've got a cool head and another potential penalty taker for when Haaland is off. I think it's similar to Gabriel Jesus when he was kind of riffing off Sergio Aguero. It's if you're always kind of going to be in the number 2 position, you have to show that you can score the goals. And Jesus came into City and scored loads of goals, and so put Aguero out of the team. And then as the years went on, he kind of stopped scoring goals, and that will be the test for Alvarez, because he scored a penalty. Did he have any other chances in the game where he looked like scoring? I can't remember any off the top of my head. There's always the potential that he plays alongside Haaland and kind of does running, which he does very well and did for Messi in the World Cup. But then you lose another forward or a midfielder, and that kind of gives a different balance to the team. So it was a good enough performance. He certainly looked sharp after his rest. Didn't have much rest, but he looked good. But I don't think the World Cup's going to change Pep's thinking on Alvarez in the long term. I mean, he was already a big fan, and he will still be. But Haaland is better.
Mm-hmm. Of course. I don't think there's any argument there. But one player he may have changed his mind on is Phil Foden. He got the third goal in the game, tapping on a lovely move down the left hand side, and he actually was deployed in midfield for the first time in quite some time. Here, Si, I should say, Cole Palmer out on the left and Foden coming back into the middle. We haven't seen him much there, as I say. It was a big reason why Gareth Southgate was kind of reluctant to play him at first during the World Cup, and definitely in a midfield or in a 10 role, because he simply doesn't play there for City at present over the last 2 years. I think when I was doing some research into that, I'd say I don't think he played double figures in midfield over the last 10 years, and in games that it has been in these sort of Carabao Cup games and FA Cup games. But here he was against a good standard of opposition, and how did he do back in the middle? Could he be seeing a return there kind of quite promptly, given, as I said, Mahrez and Grealish is looking good as well, and Alvarez there. There's a lot of attacking options. if Pep wants to fit more of them in, he can quite easily move Foden back into the midfield.
Yeah, Foden into midfield is a weird one because he came through the academy as a midfielder, and Pep sees his future in the middle, and Kevin De Bruyne sees his future in the middle, but they both said that he's not quite there yet. He's not quite disciplined enough to play that role. And I mean, also he kind of gave them a threat from the wide positions when they didn't have a number 9 that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And you think back to him scoring 3 in the derby, and that's the kind of thing he can do from out wide. But City have a big decision coming up, or 2 big decisions coming up, in the sense that Ilkay Gundogan's out of contract at the end of the year, and Bernardo Silva has said again that he will be open to leaving. So you've got Kevin De Bruyne, who's still key but not the youngest, and then depending on what their 2 other number 8s decide, they've either got to go into the market to sign a marquee midfielder, or they've got to move one of Foden and Grealish inside, or both, realistically, for next season. So Foden's time in the middle may well be coming as a reaction to 2 other decisions in the squad. I think he played very well there. It's hard to sort of think of too many games where Foden has played badly, because he is just a very good footballer. So put him wide and he will do well. Put him in the middle and he will do well. And obviously he did very well to be in the box to finish off the move for the 3rd. So yeah, full of potential. I don't think we'll see Foden too often in the middle for the rest of the season, but like I say, next season might be the time when they bring him in.
We'll talk more about the upcoming derby in next week's. We are at the start of this week, and later on this week, following the Southampton game, and we'll preview the derby. But Foden and, as I say, Walker and Cancelo all have been on the outs since the resumption of club football. Guardiola have been patient with them, or at least not exactly pleased with how fit they've been coming back, and wanting them to get back to their absolute best before putting them in a lot. But starting here, Walker starting. Do you see Foden especially? Do you see him coming back into the starting 11 on a more regular basis now, especially ahead of the derby? It's hard to predict what team they'll be for the Southampton game, which we'll talk about presently. But for the Premier League, for the big games, and there's a hell of a lot of them coming up. Is Foden, Walker, and Cancelo, are they more back in the starting frame now?
Yeah, I think Walker and Cancelo are seen as the best left back and right back. I think there's a sort of more pressure on Cancelo, in the sense that City have Ake and Laporte who can play left back. I know Stones and Akanji can play right back, but Walker's a bit ahead of Cancelo, I would say, just for his defensive ability. You would like to think that Foden comes back in more. I mean, when Guardiola has been asked why he was left out against Leeds and Everton, it was that Guardiola wanted more passes from Grealish and Mahrez to keep the tempo and not leave City too open to counters. Like we've seen now against Chelsea, what happens when you play a team that is more ready to attack you. And City have got a lot of games coming up against teams that you would like to think will attack them. If United don't attack them at Old Trafford, it's a bit embarrassing for United, because they should be considering themselves like they can compete with City and Tottenham and Arsenal. And a lot of these teams are games where you would think, yeah, you want Foden's qualities, and maybe you do want a Mahrez or a Grealish as well, but having both of them in could be seen as, a bit like fans saw after the Everton game, like too much control to the detriment of actual pace and directness and attacking threat, which is what Foden brought in the few minutes against Everton, and then continued against Chelsea.
Well, you talked there about potential players kind of moving into midfield, and one that we saw a brief kind of glimpse of in the middle against Chelsea was Rico Lewis. He came on with just a few minutes to go, and he came on in the middle quite surprisingly. It was when everyone was expecting the right back to go off when he came on, but he remained on, and Lewis went into midfield. I think he was alongside Phillips, and I want to say Palmer by that point in the middle. Quite a youthful Blues midfield, and it was only 4 minutes he was on the pitch plus added time, and there wasn't an awful lot of it. But I think the fact that we've praised Lewis plenty over the last few weeks, and rightly so. But I think the fact that Guardiola already trusts him in not only right back, and as we've seen, kind of tucking in from right back into midfield, but to actually just be in midfield as itself, it kind of speaks volumes of how much he trusts this barely turned 18-year-old already. And as I said, I don't think, even with Foden, I don't think we've seen him put any sort of this level of trust in any youth player before, apart from maybe Messi. But I think Messi is a bit of a different kettle of fish there.
Yeah, like I've been saying, we are very much in new territory with Rico Lewis. I've not checked, but I think Lewis himself is up to what's he on? He's pretty much played the equivalent of 6 full games already for City, and
But 13 appearances, I'd say. It looks
it's about 540 minutes, and that is remarkable. Like I will check, but I'd like to know how much Foden played in his first season or his second season, and it's kind of about this time when usually you get a glimpse of the youngsters and then they fade away because City are then at the business end of competitions. But I don't really think we'll see that with Lewis because, like Guardiola said, he has exceeded their expectations and is seen as an option in the first team. And like you say, predominantly he's a right back, but he spent so long in central midfield that if Guardiola wants to give rest to Rodri, or if Phillips can't do that, or also needs rest if he's playing, Phillips is down to start at Southampton on Wednesday, but with extra. Having barely played 90 minutes for so long, will he be able to last 90 minutes? If not, Lewis is an option where kind of last month maybe he wasn't. So it is a real find for City this season, and the fact that Guardiola is willing to keep giving him minutes shows that he's still got the right attitude. Because again, if Guardiola isn't entirely happy with you, he won't put you on.
Absolutely, and I've just got Phil Foden's first season stats up here, 2017-18. Now, maths is not my strong suit, but from about 10 first team games, I think, in the Champions League and in the Premier League and in the Carabao Cup, I've got his minutes at around between 300 and 400 for the whole season. So, Lewis has already surpassed that in both appearances and minutes, and I agree, it's not like Taylor Howard-Bellis came in for a couple of League Cup games and we think, he looks really good, maybe he'll have a presence going forward, and I'm sure there's a few more here and there you could name, but with Lewis it just already feels like he's a fulcrum member of the first team.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be forgotten how big a talent Foden was and is, but having made his debut in a friendly against United in the summer of 2017, Guardiola was like, remember this kid, and has since said he's the best youngster he's worked with. So you probably get more minutes as a defender than a forward in a Guardiola team if you're coming through, because it's the forwards that he really has to rely on to win games and to break down defences. So you can understand why Lewis might have more, but it also shows how good Lewis has done, how amazingly well he is doing to be getting those kind of minutes in the City team, because it is really, really hard, and he's up against Kyle Walker with however many appearances and caps and international games, and Cancelo the same. So it shows, and it also gives more encouragement to the academy players, because the more players they see breaking through, the more they're like, yeah, that could actually be me.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's plenty more to come. And just to wrap up the Chelsea kind of review, that it's quite telling that there was no Erling Haaland or Kevin De Bruyne involved at all. Science City, but really won without any drama whatsoever. Really comprehensive, and that's really good going, and that's really good to know. We know Haaland's got a few injury problems, and well, not problems at the minute, but they could strike at any time given his kind of not the best record, and De Bruyne, getting on as well. Not had the cleanest bill of health over the last few years. So the fact that City are kind of getting on really comfortably without either certainly bodes well, especially as we said numerous times with such a hectic fixture schedule coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I said like every call Guardiola made came off, and that included the bench. Being able to sort of put De Bruyne, Haaland, Gundogan, Stones, Ake on the bench was good, but being able to keep them there was really good. It's a funny one really, because like Chelsea at home in the FA Cup or Southampton away in the League Cup, which is harder, and you'd probably say Chelsea at first, but with the injuries Chelsea have got, and then Southampton's a quarter-final, so win this game and you get closer to the trophy than you will if you beat Chelsea in the FA Cup. And the FA Cup is kind of is important to City, but just because of the way the calendar works, they tend to give it all for the Carabao, and then by the time the FA Cup rolls around, it's before or after a big Champions League game or Premier League game. And City have had a habit in the last few years of just picking a bad team for Champions League, for FA Cup semi-finals, and kind of going out limply. And that is a shame, but kind of shows that the Carabao takes more priority just because of the way the calendar falls. So, beating Chelsea is a big thing, and beating Chelsea twice is a big thing. And, they've not got the best draw with probably Arsenal at home. But it is a home game, and also, everyone's looking for weaknesses in Arsenal. And if City take them to the cleaners at the Etihad and at the end of January, that's going to give them a lift for going to the Emirates. I think it's mid-Feb they go. So, that is another opportunity for them to make ground in the league, I would say, if they can do that in the same way that teams will be looking at them thinking, yeah, they've beaten Chelsea twice in a week, they're quite good. So it's good that Guardiola has all of his players that he left on the bench available for Southampton to get them nearer to that first trophy of the season.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that FA Cup draw, because if City, as you say, want to advance further, they may have to face Arsenal or League One's Oxford United. Those two teams will face off in the last FA Cup game of this round. There's a potential for an upset. We've seen Stevenage pull off a massive one against Aston Villa as City were soundly beating Chelsea, so that's a good one for the TV choosers of games, wasn't it? A really sound choice there. But as you say, Arsenal, it'll be the weekend of the 28th of January. The game will take place. Should Arsenal get through, and then, as you say, the final league meeting, the first league meeting, I should say, will come just a couple of weeks later on the weekend. On 15th of February. We bemoan the fact that the first match at the Emirates, or the Etihad, got kind of postponed due to the passing of the Queen, and that would have been, at the time, City and Arsenal were kind of even closer than they are now, and it would have been quite an interesting one to see Arsenal's title credentials. And since then, since missing that game, Arsenal have kind of gone from strength to strength. City have had their wobble. Arsenal seem to be kind of maybe feeling the pressure a little bit now. They drew in Newcastle recently, so having this game as a little precursor to that Premier League clash, as you say, at the Etihad, could be really interesting. It comes, it adds probably an unwanted fixture to an absolutely hectic January, which now reads as the derby, and then Tottenham at home, a trip to the visit of Wolves before playing Arsenal in the FA Cup, and then at the start of February going to Tottenham. So it's an absolutely ramshackled couple of weeks for City, but could, as you say, as we've said numerous times, the big games tend to get City up for it a bit more, as we've seen with the double header against Chelsea. They like that pressure upon them, and having Arsenal just a few weeks before, as you say there, if they can deal a win and deal a really serious psychological blow ahead of the Premier League, it could be a kind of a hidden benefit that we didn't see coming.
Yeah, I mean, Guardiola's kind of flatly refused any suggestion that City have the edge in the title race still, or that Arsenal's inexperience might cost them. But there's every chance it will, and everyone is waiting to see whether an Arsenal team that have flickered with promise in the past can keep it up. And I don't think some expected them to still be here in January, but here they are, and they probably will be there until close to the end, if not the final day. So they have done really well. And I think back to the game at the very start of 2022 when City went to the Emirates, and it was a really, really tough game, and Arsenal really outplayed them. And I think Arsenal were 1-0 up, and Ake cleared off the line, and then a minute later Gabriel was sent off, and City equalised with a soft penalty, and then it was a last-minute winner from Rodri, and you sort of sensed a shift in Arsenal, and that the soft Arsenal were gone, and something decent was there. And obviously that didn't pan out across the second half of the season completely for them, because Arteta still faced a bit of pressure, but the framework was in place then for Arsenal to build something, and this season they really have. However, they've lost every time at the Etihad since Guardiola's been there, and there have been a few big scorelines and a lot of comfortable wins. So however much hunger there is in this Arsenal team, and however much they've kind of defied the pressure so far, at the end of January they've still got to come to City, a place where no player is used to winning. They're just used to suffering a comfortable defeat and losing. So if they can win and knock City out of the cup, that'll be huge for them. But at the same time, if City win, it will inevitably lead to people saying, yep, City are better than Arsenal, they've got the edge, and kind of give City a bit of momentum for this Arsenal team. Because when City have been top, everyone's like, how do we see a weakness? How do we see how they can be beaten? And when they slip up, everyone sees what lessons they can take. And Everton, said they looked at the Brentford win at City to show how they could maybe unsettle them. So if City can unseat Arsenal in the FA Cup, then it does open it up for others to see maybe how they can get a result against Arteta and his team.
It'll certainly be an exciting one, and we can't wait for it. But before then, there's another cup competition to deal with. On Wednesday, City will travel down south to face Southampton in the quarter-finals of the Carabao Cup. As you mentioned there, Si, City like the Carabao Cup a lot. They'll no doubt be wanting to win it back after finally relinquishing their grip on it last season. But comes at an awkward time. It's a big trip down to the south coast, just a few days before the early kick-off on Saturday, with an away trip to Old Trafford in the Manchester derby. How do you see... Southampton are struggling at the minute, of course. Did get a win in the FA Cup themselves at the weekend over Crystal Palace, but are at the foot of the Premier League table. Nathan Jones, got his first win in charge on Saturday, but it's certainly been struggling since taking over from Ralph Hasenhüttl. How do you see this one going, and what kind of team do you think Pep Guardiola will go with? You kind of imagine a few changes here, but as I say, a game he'll want to win regardless of how many changes he makes.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what he does with Haaland, especially with that Manchester derby on at 12:30 on the Saturday. Because the kickoff times, teams in the Champions League, if they've got a Wednesday night away game, no longer have to play at 12:30 on a Saturday, because they've accepted that the travelling is too much. But I mean, I'm not sure on City's travel arrangements. I would kind of like to think for their sake they're flying back on Wednesday night rather than going on a coach, because that can probably take more travel time than a European away for them. So there's not much turnaround, and with Haaland's fitness, you wonder whether he can get through both games. I think 60 minutes start at Southampton and then take him off for the derby would be the ideal option for Guardiola, but you don't know what the match situation is, and if you're chasing a goal, are you going to be taking off Haaland? I think that's where maybe Alvarez can come in. But yeah, I would kind of expect it to be a stronger team, slightly stronger than it was for the Chelsea game, because it was a strong team for Chelsea, but he's already said today that Calvin Phillips will start, so there has been an acknowledgement that some first team players need rest. Yeah, you can spin Southampton either way. You can say they've won under Nathan Jones, they will take confidence into that, or you can say maybe better for City that they've won because they won't be as desperate for a win. It's a free hit for them because no one expects them to beat City, and it's a difficult away for City in the context of the draw, where they could have had Southampton at home, or they could have had a much shorter trip with a lot of the teams in the draw. So it's a difficult one, but like I say, City will be expected to win, and although the turnaround is tight, they are used to these kind of turnarounds. So it's you would expect kind of your De Bruyne's and Haaland's to come back in. Yeah,
and kind of the added complication, I guess, of the Carabao Cup is that it's still a two-legged semi-final, despite the kind of truncated calendar and whatnot that's coming. It leads to some great games, draws depending. But I can see it being a bit of an issue this time around, given the truncated nature of the season. Should City advance past Southampton, the two semi-final legs will be kind of the last week of January, and then the kind of last couple of days or first week of February, like kind of wedged in between a potential game against Arsenal, definitely a game against Tottenham, and then the other game against Arsenal. It really is going to be an absolutely hectic calendar for City, and the real challenge for Guardiola is going to be managing that small squad he's got and the injuries, and where it will be important for Phillips to get a good load of minutes in his legs and start performing to any sort of level after his kind of disappointing start, of course. And yeah, it's going to be quite a challenge negotiating this. And as Guardiola has said often, no one knows what's going to happen after the World Cup. I think most teams have pretty, apart from Chelsea, who've been absolutely ravaged, everyone else has pretty much not really, from my viewpoint anyway, haven't suffered a massive upturn in injuries to any extent. But I think we'll soon start seeing now, with the fatigue, with so many games, of course, the Champions League resumes in February as well. This will be the real kind of testing grounds of City and Arsenal and any other would-be challenges.
I mean, they're going to get United in the semis, aren't they? If both make it through.
Oh yeah, 3 games in a month.
I think it was consecutive years they got them in the semi-final, and yeah, I mean they'll play Chelsea 4 times this year. Maybe more with the Champions League. Liverpool 3 times, maybe more with the Champions Leagues. 4, yeah. So it's kind of made for them to play another big team again, but without getting kind of too far ahead. City's biggest weakness under Guardiola has been knockout ties, and they've a lot has gone against them in the Champions League, and they've not quite managed the Champions League well. But there were 2 years ago when they made the Champions League final, they really did. And last year, I think you could paint it as them falling again, but equally, I just think it was so bizarre. The Real Madrid semi-final was sort of like one in a 100 chance of happening the way it unfolded. So City would generally, they back themselves over 38 games. I think they back themselves against anyone over 2 games. And United would be very tough. But aside from that, Newcastle would be tough. Leicester, Forest, Wolves,
Charlton, if they get past United.
Charlton, yeah. So I don't think, it's bad in the sense that it's another game in the calendar, and you can see why one-legged semi-finals would make sense. But at the same time, City would prefer 2 legs rather than 1 leg, because it reduces their chance of suffering a shock, I would say, as heavy favourites for any tie in any competition they go into. So, it's get past Southampton first. And I should say, for all the chat of Arsenal in the 4th round, Oxford might beat them tonight and cause a big shock. So we probably can't talk too much about ties that haven't happened yet. But I think there are no real demons for City should they make it past Southampton.
Absolutely. Well, we'll keep a keen eye on Arsenal versus Oxford and all of City's upcoming games over on manchestereveningnews.co.uk/Manchester City. You can get all the build-up, match coverage and reaction to all the games, of course, and any other news and interesting tidbits that come out of the Etihad. And of course, you can get all our lovely insights to it right here on the Talking City podcast. You can also watch this podcast, if you so wish, in living colour all over on our new YouTube channel. I think, I can't remember what it's called. Man City -MEN, there you go. Go and give that a Google. Give us a nice little subscribe and like and get our numbers up. That would be very much appreciated, as is your continued listenership, everyone. So thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you later on this week to talk about the Southampton game and look forward to the big Manchester derby on Saturday. But until then, it's goodbye for now. So ta-ra.